if we're empty and we're feeling continuously empty, not loved, not seen, mistreated, we continuously get depleted.
Why do you think that some couples, like obviously most couples, they start out healthy, right? They start out giving. Maybe it's a year down, maybe it's 5 years down, maybe it's 10 years down. They find themselves in this weird situation.
The first thing you've got to do, in my opinion, is
Welcome to God, You, and Everyone Else. My name is Melany Thomas, and I am here with Yasti Puig. She has been a marriage mentor and coach for over 20 years, and she has been married for 25 years, and she's the author of De-Weed Your Marriage, and also happens to be my mom. So today we are going to be talking about the topic of how to get my spouse to fall back in love with me. On YouTube, that was a very high asked question, and we believe that we want to tackle that in this episode. So if you have fallen out of love, or maybe you never want to get to that point, this episode is for you. So we're going to dive into it. How to get my spouse to love me again.
Yeah, thank you, Melany. It's definitely an honor to be asked to be on your podcast. So thank you for allowing me to be here. I think the biggest question is, how did we get there? Right? We always got to find the root. So you can ask two questions. The first one would be, how did I fall in love with my spouse to begin with? Or how did he fall in love with me to begin with, right? What happened that caused us to fall in love? And that kind of helps us to find what happened to make us fall out of love, right? So if I were to ask you that about you and Torrance, what made you fall in love with Torrance? What made it so that you felt like, wow, I love this guy?
Yeah. He spent time with me. There's a lot of quality time. We did a lot of dates together, talking hours on the phone, talking late at night, hanging out. He would write me letters, and he would say just very kind things that made me feel very seen. And he would help me with things, help me whatever I need help with, whatever encouragement I needed. He did all those things.
That's awesome. Yeah. So when you find that, right, I immediately know what those languages are, right? Immediately as you're speaking. So I find that many couples don't realize that we have a love bank in us, right? From the moment a baby is born, we have this little heart love bank inside of us that needs to be filled, right, with love. And so if you think about the principles of a bank account, we're talking love bank. So let's talk about the natural principles of a bank account. When you think about the principles of a bank account, what is that? You go to the bank, you open a bank account, and you make deposits and you make withdrawals, right? And so a good bank account is one that you do more deposits than you do withdrawals, right? And so what happens if you were doing little deposits every day, let's say you're putting in $1 every day, and at the end of the month, you are supposed to have $31, right? But you go and you withdraw 50. What happens? Your bank goes on overdraft, right? And as it'll be, even if you went in overdraft for $1, what would the bank do? They charge you an overdraft fee, right? That puts you more in a negative, right? And so that's kind of what happens to us, right? We think we're loving our spouse and we're doing things and, we're going about our day and all of these things. And we're thinking we're putting deposits in. But if I was going to the bank and I'm putting deposits in and I'm putting it in the wrong bank account or incorrectly, maybe I wrote the wrong bank account number and I walked away, that deposit never made it to the bank, right? And so you go to the bank at the end of the month and you're going to go withdraw that money. They'll be like, nothing here, right? And now you've gone in overdraft. And every time you go into overdraft, there's big fees on top of it, right? So in our marriage, we make deposits and we make withdrawals. Well, how do we make withdrawals? Well, easy situations, things that make the other person not feel so loved, right? Not feel appreciated. And so when we make that withdrawal, if there is funds in there, if that bank account is full, then it's not a big deal. But when you make a withdrawal and there's no money in there, it's a big deal, even if it's a little dollar, right? Think about what happens if, you're driving down the road and you get a flat tire, right? If you have $3,000 in the bank, is a flat tire a big deal?
No.
No, it really not, right? But if you have $20 in your bank account and it's a week before payday and you get a flat tire,
Yeah, it's not good.
it's not good. It's a really big deal, right? Exactly what happens in marriage. If we're empty and we're feeling continuously empty, not loved, not seen, mistreated, unappreciated every day, every day, every day, we continuously get depleted, right? And maybe he shows up with flowers and you're like, wow, big deal, flowers, right? Is that going to make it up to whatever weeks, days you have been feeling unloved? That flower bouquet is not going to mean anything. You just throw it in the garbage, you might as well, right? But where we keep a very healthy relationship, where we're continuously feeling each other's love bank, because this is not one-sided, right? It's both. And when we're keeping a healthy bank account, we get a flat tire, we get a situation, we say things that are out of love, maybe a little bit disrespectful to our spouse, or, a little mean because we're in a hurry, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a big deal because that bank account is still full, right?
Why do you think that some couples, like obviously most couples, they start out healthy, right? They start out giving, 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 giving. And then maybe it's a year down, maybe it's 5 years down, maybe it's 10 years down. They find themselves in this weird situation. Why do you think that somehow it's not continuing as how it started?
Yeah. So a couple of things is we don't get that bank account back to a balance, right? We continuously keep it in negative. And so it might take a year to get there, but it's little withdrawals every day that get us there, no matter how we look at it. That is the bottom line. If we're not feeling loved and this person is continuously mistreating us, it might take a month for some people. It might take 6 months. It might take a year. It might take 5. Think about unfaithfulness. Is that a little withdrawal or is that a big withdrawal? It's being mean with our words. A little withdrawal, maybe, depending on what you say. So it no matter how you look at it, the bottom line is you have been depleted long enough. And if you keep your bank account at a negative continuously, what is that bank going to do? Going to shut down your account, right? That's what divorce is all about. When they say bank account closed, my love bank is closed, I don't care what you do. I am no longer accepting your deposits.
Yeah. So I'm sure you've met with a lot of couples that have found themselves in this situation. Where do they even start? Like, do they start doing nice things? Like, what do they even know how to, like, what to do? Like, where do you even begin when you're in a mess like that,
Yeah, that's a huge and very important question, because if the first thing you've got to do, in my opinion, is go online and do the 5 love language test. Okay. And we're going to talk about that principle in just a minute. That is a book written by Dr. Gary Chapman, the 5 love languages, right? And in order for you to fulfill that love bank again, you got to find out what deposits are being accepted, right? They're all going to be accepted, but some of them are going to be more meaningful than others, right? So think about a dollar exchange. I might put in $1, but you actually receive 5 because that is your love language. But if that's not your love language, I'm putting in $1, I'm getting $1 back, right? That's it. So for example, my very last love language is gifts. Like, I don't care for gifts whatsoever. And so when Papi and I, started together, he loves to give gifts to me and to other people. And so he would show up with this stuff and it would annoy me because I'm like, number one, I would don't like it. Number two, you spend way too much money on it and you need to go take it back to the store. And so he would be like so hurt, like, I'm here trying to do something nice for you. And you're like, he would show up with flowers. $50 for flowers. And I'll be like, I could have bought me 3 outfits with that money. Like, what are you doing? Right? So we've got to understand what that person needs, because otherwise you're making an effort, but it's not being received well. And that person might not want to tell you because they'll be like, oh, great, thank you for flowers. But they're not really receiving it well. It's not really a good deposit. So the very, very first step is, and maybe this person's not willing to take it. They're not willing to take that. Then watch what their reaction is by you taking an initiative and being intentional about doing each one of those languages and see how they react to them. See when they react when you do the opposite even of that love language, right?
So what are the 5 love languages for someone who hasn't read the book yet?
Absolutely. So the 5 love languages are words of affirmation, acts of service, quality time, gifts, like I said, and physical touch, right?
Yeah. Do you think that these love languages change in seasons for people, or do they change at all?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I kind of feel like the 5 love languages attached to your personality a little bit. It could be also what you didn't receive as a child or what you did receive as a child that makes it really important to you. But also there could be a little bit of a flip in priority in the love languages. For example, your love language could have been, words of affirmation and quality time, where now, because you have a baby and there's life going on, acts of service becomes even more important maybe than quality time, right? So they could change a little bit. I think we all receive all 5, like I said, but some of them become a little bit more meaningful. And you're always going to have 2 main love languages, but there's always going to be one that you're like, yeah, I can give up everything else, but not this, right?
That's really good. Yeah, I would totally agree, because I think in a season with little kids, the acts of service, I think it was always there, but it's like more like elevated in this season. I'm like, it speaks volumes. So I think there's a common thing that I've seen with couples or women or men, is that if they want that specific thing, maybe they already know, they're aware of their love languages, or they don't, maybe they can't say it like that, but they're like, I just want him to get me flowers, or I just want him to like say I'm beautiful every day, or she doesn't respect me, and like she doesn't know what that means, and like they're in this situation. I feel like I've seen that pretty common. And is there a way for a spouse to go about it in a way that's not like demanding, but like how could they communicate that to their spouse so that they can receive what they want?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I think the easiest way would be if you actually get this information and you read it and you share it with this person, right? Go look at what this book says. This is really interesting. What do you think? Does this make sense to you? Do you think, let's take this test and see what it comes out, or something like that, and maybe that person is willing. That would be the easiest thing, because then you both get on the same page, you both know each other's love language, and then it's easy, right, to fill each other's love bank. If that's not the case and that person's just like not willing to like listen to any of this stuff, you could possibly ask them. You could say, what do I do that makes you feel loved? What do you really love about me, right? What can I do more of that makes you really feel loved and appreciated? And see if that person can come up with an answer.
Yeah, that's really good. I remember one of my first dates with Torrance, we had like it's like this book called like, I don't know, something like the date challenge or something.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I forget what it's called. But one of them was to take the 5 love language test and then within the week do something with it within that love bank thing. And actually recently, I was having like off days, and I was like, oh, I just want to like I just want to read something nice about me. Like, and I keep all of my cards that people give me because one of my love languages is words of affirmation. And so I actually have like a specific bowl with all the letters Torrance wrote to me in our dating season. And so I pulled it out and I'm like just reading the letters in my room. And he walks in on me reading them. And he was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm just reading your love letters." And he was like, "Why?" And I was like, "I just wanted to hear something nice." And like, I feel like I could have gone about it in like I want you to write me letters. Like, you never write me letters anymore, because he hasn't wrote me a letter in a while. And like, it's okay. Like, I could have gone about it that way. But when he saw me reading them, he was like, "Oh," like it sparked something in him. And then I also said, "It would be nice if you wrote me letters sometimes." And then he was like, "Busy, different season." And I was like, "Yeah, but like if you ever think about it, like it'd be nice, just like if you think about it." And then like literally like the next day he like wrote me a letter, and it was like super sweet. And so I think there are ways to inspire, especially like, a woman definitely has the gift to inspire her man, but a man can also definitely inspire his woman, and not in a way, I think, is like sometimes women think that sparking a man's jealousy can help them get what they want, but really a man doesn't want his energy sparked. He wants, his jealousy sparked. He wants to be inspired. Mm-hmm. And I think a beautiful way a woman can do that is how she's already been created, through her beauty, through her life-giving words, through her loving actions. Those are ways that you can inspire your man to do what you want him to do. And it doesn't have to be in this cruel, like, beating, nagging wife way. And I think we are all susceptible to that, right? Like, we're all susceptible to like come across in that strong way to get what we want. But we can really inspire people to do it differently. And I love what you said about, hey, let's take this test together and like make it a date, like a fun date thing. Like, let's take this test together. What are you? Oh, what am I? Ooh, what can we do this week to like show that gift? Or what does that, like, what are some things in that gift that you like? Like, do you like it when I hold your hand? Or do you like it when I pat your back or like give you a massage? Like, what are the things that you personally like? And that really makes it more personal to them and makes you aware, so you could be more active in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said something really interesting, Melanie, and that is we're actually going to talk about that in the next 30 minutes in our second session. But, men need to feel respected, right? Women need to feel loved, men need to feel respected, but we don't know what that means. So we're going to get to that in the next 30 minutes as well, because I feel like that's really important, right? Now, when you were reading your love letters and you were refilling your love bank, basically, you were just going to go recharge. The truth of the matter is that it doesn't have to be a full-blown letter, right? Even if you would have just written a little sticky note and left it on the refrigerator and said, "Just thinking about you today. Thank you for everything you do for me." Left for work, that would speak volumes, right? So we sometimes think that it's, "Oh my God, I gotta sit here and write letters. Seriously, I'm not romantic." No, it's just letting that person know that you're thinking about them, right? And not continuously criticizing them. So let's talk about those 5 love languages and get a little bit more understanding of what they truly mean. Because words of affirmation, yeah, compliments is one thing, right? We all like to get compliments, but it goes beyond that. It goes a little bit more with being appreciated and saying, not just, "Oh, you're so beautiful and you look nice today," right? Or "You have a really nice behind," or something like that, right? Because we love to hear that from our spouses too. But it goes beyond that. It goes where, you may be cooking dinner and he says, "Mel, thank you so much for dinner tonight. That was so amazing. You work so hard and I just appreciate that from you." Then that speak volumes, right? Right, right. Any simple things. And, there is a video that we're going to actually link to the bottom of this video. And it's from Dr. Gary Chapman. And the video is called "The Essentials of a Healthy Marriage." And he's actually speaking at like a college or something. And he goes in and he explains these 5 love languages really well. But then there's a bonus towards the end of that video, because he speaks about the 5 apology languages, which a lot of people don't know about. And we won't get into those. Maybe in another segment we will. But in that video, he says something very particular. He says, this couple came to him and the wife is like, how can I say anything nice about him? He does nothing nice. Like, what can I even say? And he says, well, does he take a shower every day? And she's like, well, yeah, he eats every day. And he goes, well, start there. Thank you for taking a shower. Thank you for smelling nice for me. There's always something that you can find that you can focus on, right? I always say that whatever you focus on become bigger. And if you focus on the negatives are going to become bigger in your marriage and in your spouse, in your marriage life, right? But if you focus even on those little things that are nice, hey, he filled up the gas tank for me. Maybe he didn't leave his shoes in the middle of the living room. Maybe he did actually make the clothes actually made it to the hamper. So there's always something that you can say nice to that person. And even if their love language is not the main thing, words have power, right? So actually, let's read, Melanie, I think Proverbs 18:21. Read that scripture for me.
The tongue has a power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit.
So that means that in our mouth, we have the power to either bring life into our marriage or bring death into our marriage, right? Yeah. And you have the choice of which words you're going to use towards your spouse and towards your children as well. And if you choose to bring life, you're going to eat its fruit, right? If you choose to bring death into your marriage and continuously putting them down and continuously speaking ill to them, and even not the words that we say, but then the tone in which we say things. If we speak death, we're going to eat that fruit too. So we got to be mindful of that. We have the power to bring life or death into our marriage and into our children's life. But also for people whose love language, their primary love language is words of affirmation, criticism is huge, huge. I will never forget the day that I got in your car. And I didn't realize what I was doing, right? I almost was like, I thought I was inspiring you. But I got in your car and I was like, oh, Melanie, this car needs new covers, remember? Yeah. And then you're like, ignored me. And then we get down the road a little bit and I said, you pulled out your wallet and I'm like, you need a new wallet, girl. You're like, okay, Mom. And then I don't know what the third thing was that I said, but you were like, Mom, enough already. All you've done is criticize me since you got in this car. And that was not a deposit. That was a total withdrawal. In my head, because, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, but in my head, I'm thinking, I got to get Melanie new covers and I got to get Melanie a new wallet. And I did, didn't I? A few weeks later, I got you a new wallet. But in my head, I'm not thinking I'm criticizing and hurting your feelings, but we have to be mindful of that. And ever since then, I've tried to be mindful that anything that I say that is not a wanted advice, it's actually criticism. So that's really important to remember. Unwanted advice equals criticism. And for someone whose love language, it's words of affirmation, and unwanted advice is a really big withdrawal in their love bank account.
So what's the next one?
So the next one is receiving gifts. That's my least favorite one, like I said. But for some people,
it's big for some people.
It's big for some people. And the funny thing is that people think it's big gifts, right? Oh, yeah, a car would be nice. Yeah, all these things. But truly, for people that love language is gifts, even if you brought them a rock, it's such a big deal. Hey, I found this rock out there and it reminded me of you because it's solid and strong and beautiful. That speaks volumes to that person. And Dr. Gary Chapman makes the example that for a kid that the love language is gift, even if you gave them a rock, they would go to college and you will find that rock in their bottom drawer because that would be meaningful to them, right? And can you read Ephesians 5:25, Melanie?
Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any blemish, but holy and blameless. In this way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies.
Right. So to me, that tells me God gave himself for his church, right? That's the biggest gift ever. So if the love language is gifts, even if it's little, even if it's big, it's the biggest gift ever, right? So for someone that loves receiving gifts, that's going to be special now. For the person who's that's their love language, the opposite of that, it's huge. If you miss a birthday, if you forget an anniversary, if you like all of those important dates are huge for that person. And so you've got to make sure, hey, set yourself a reminder on your phone or something, but just make sure that you don't ever miss those important days because they're going to remind you for a very long time that you did that.
They'll
Right?
remember.
No, remember. And if you remember, it's such a big deal for them. And they will always remember that. You know, I forgot to mention this, but for our anniversary one year, we took a cruise and we barely made it on that cruise. We were so broke. And I didn't have a lot of money for a gift. So I sat at our house and I wrote, it was for our 10-year anniversary. For every year that we were married, I wrote 10 reasons why I loved him and 10 things that made me feel special. And I wrote them, typed them up on this little pieces of paper, and I cut them really thin. They were little stripes, and then I rolled them up, and they were all these little curls. And then I took this jar and I filled it. His favorite chocolate is Snickers. So I filled it with little Snickers and I threw all those little papers in there. And I took it on the cruise. And on the night of our anniversary, I had him open it. We've been married this December together for 25 years. And every time I ask him, what was your favorite gift? He always says, all of my little pieces of paper in my jar. He still has all those pieces of paper. We still have the jar. So for him, not only was, his gifts is not a big deal for him, but words of affirmation are. So all those little gifts that was a huge gift for him, getting all those words of affirmation in there. Want me to go to the next one? Okay. So the next one, it's acts of service. Okay. Papi calls that the slave love language. Because it's anything that you can do to make that person's life easier, right? It doesn't mean you have to be their slaves, like Papi says. It means anything that you do that makes my life easy, that you think of me, makes my life so much easier and so much, it makes me feel love. Like that's my love language. So for example, Papi knows that every Monday morning is the only day that I have to leave the house, right? I work from home. So he makes sure that the car is full of gas so that I don't have to stop for gas on Monday, right? To me, that's huge. That's a huge act of service. If he gets home and I'm working still, he'll walk in and he'll say, what do you want me to cook for dinner? He doesn't say, do you need me to cook dinner? Do you need me to help you with dinner? No, he obviously sees I'm still working. He obviously knows we've got to eat dinner. So he just does it. Sometimes he doesn't even ask me. He just, next thing I know, I have dinner on the table. So anything that will make that person's life, if you see them carrying a whole bunch of bags, take one away from them, oh my God, that makes the world to them, right? When it's the man who the love language is acts of service, making them lunch to take to work, making sure that their clothes is clean, making sure that their house is clean when they get home. What else can I think about? Can you think of anything else for like a husband? Hey, but that's a guy for the girl. That would be huge, right? So yeah, but if the guy has that love language, anything that you can do for your spouse. Hey, picking his outfit. Some guys like that. Some guys don't. But like picking his outfit for Sunday morning and making sure his outfit is ready for church, right? Or just keeping the car clean so he doesn't have to do it, right? Little things.
Cutting the grass.
Cutting the grass.
That's a big one.
That's funny. I asked Papi, what would make me the perfect wife? And he said, if you cut the grass. Guess what I was doing the next week? Cutting the grass. I didn't like it, but I did it. So anyways, it's really anything that will ease that person's burden, bottom line. Okay. And the next one is quality time, which you alluded to at the beginning. So you said the two things that made you feel loved was how much time you spend together, so quality time, and all the nice things he said about you or to you, or in all the love letters, right? Those are words of affirmation. So what did he do? He filled that love bank, right? And once that love bank is filled, when we fall in love, right? But it's the totally same thing when it's the opposite. When your love bank is completely depleted and you can't go any longer, it's called divorce, right? So, all right, so quality time. That means just giving them undivided attention. That means if you go out to dinner, we have this little fly. If we go out to dinner, don't bring your cell phone and be on your cell phone the whole entire time, right? That's not quality time. If we're watching a movie or something, don't be on your cell phone while you're watching the movie with me because you're really not with me, right? If we, I don't know, go out for a walk, that's quality time. If we cook together, that's quality time. If we are laying next to each other and we're not saying a word, but we're just there together, it's quality time. Can you think of anything else that makes you feel like you're really spending quality time together?
I think all of those that you said we do. Like we go on walks, we watch things together, we talk about like what we read in the Bible, even just doing things that we are doing alone but together. Like we're both reading a book, or we're both like separately but together, we're both working side by side, but like we're not talking, but we're doing it together. We're going to a coffee shop or whatever. So, yeah.
All right, and the last one is physical touch. Now, many people think about physical touch being sexual, like sex and kissing and all of these things. Not at all. Physical touch is as simple as holding hands. Physical touch is as simple as caressing their hair. You're driving down the street or in the car and you just lay your hands on their thigh. As long as you're touching them somehow. Yeah, sex is part of it too, but it's minimal. It's anything that keeps that physical contact. I have a couple that I know that physical touch is both of their primary love languages. So they're all over each other all the time, holding their hands, touching each other. If he's driving, she's caressing his head. She's not doing, then he's touching her leg. Like they've got to be touching somehow. And so that just makes you feel loved, right? I have a couple that, that is her primary love language, and that is his least primary love language. And so there's a challenge, right, when that happens. But we have to learn how to speak the other person's love language. If you want your marriage to be successful, if you want your spouse to feel loved, you've got to speak their love language, and you might have to go out of your comfort zone, right? It might not be easy for you to go give them a hug and like rub their back and be like, oh my God. That might not come natural to you. But love is sacrifice, right? And if we want to ensure that our marriage is a healthy one, we can't be selfish and be like, well, that's not comfortable for me. Well, I don't want to do that. Well, then you're not going to have a happy spouse because that love bank needs to get filled. And it's like saying to Capital One, I'm not going to pay my bills. Well, they're going to shut down your credit card. You have to do what it takes for that person to feel love. Again, I'm going to refer back to Dr. Gary Chapman's video. He mentions the fact that he hates vacuuming the floors, right? Because that's the one thing his mother always made him do when he was growing up. Before he could go out, he had to vacuum the floors. And he would say, the moment I get out of here, I will never vacuum floors again. Well, guess what? His wife's love language is acts of service. So guess what he does? He vacuums the floors.
He didn't know he was being trained.
Yeah, exactly right. That's a good one. Absolutely. Yeah. So you have to really think, you can't really think, well, what do I need? What do I need? No, what does that person need? And it's like that golden rule, right? You give what you want to receive. And it's not, I'm going to scratch your back so you can scratch mine. It's, I'm going to scratch your back. I'm going to give you love because that's what you need. Not so that you can give me love back. It is going to work and it is going to eventually happen, but you don't do it for that reason. And you asked a question earlier to Melanie, like, how do you tell that person, right? This is what you need. A lot of us feel like, well, it will be selfish and arrogant to say, this is what I need. You know what is selfish and arrogant? To think that your spouse is going to figure it out. That's unselfish. That's being selfish. If you speak what you need, then you give them the opportunity to be able to fulfill that love bank. But if you're like, "Oh, well, she's going to have to figure it out." Well, hello. Sometimes we don't even know what we need to feel loved, and we're expecting them to figure it out. That would be unfair. And it would be rightful a sin for you to be so selfish and immature to say, well, he's just going to have to figure it out. That's just not fair at all. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so huge to be able to communicate your needs. And I remember like early on in our marriage, I remember having conversations similar to that with Torrance. And I was like, hey, like, I need you to do acts of service. Like, I was very clear, like, I need this. And he was like, well, like, and I'm like, and I said that exactly. I said, it might sound selfish of me to say that, to require that of you. But if you require these things of me, I should be able to ask what these things from you. And so it should be an equal exchange, So I think again, it's like, it is so important how you ask for those things. And sometimes it takes like really processing your emotions and your thoughts and being able to say it in a way that's not going to be from a place of anger or a place of annoyance or a place of irritation, but a place of love, and be like, listen, I love you and I want to make this work and I want us to be in a thriving, happy marriage. And these are the things that I need. And what are the things that you need to, and turn it back around to like, what can I do for you? Or even not even that, but just asking them first, like, how can I bless you? How can I help you? And I think one of the things that we haven't talked about is like God coming in the picture of it. If a man feels not respected, or if a woman feels unloved, or they're struggling in their marriage, and you alluded to some of the attitudes, right, of like, well, he has to figure it out, or I'm not going to do that unless he does this or she does that. Like that attitude is not going to fix it, right? And so allowing God to come into your heart and speak to you about your character and what you need to do, and also praying that God would restore your marriage and help you to, maybe your heart has become hardened. Maybe you've become resentful. Maybe you have unforgiveness and bitterness in your heart because it's been the same thing over and over, day after day, day after day. Nothing's changed. And it really, God needs to work on your heart, and you need to surrender some of those things and pray and ask him, and pray for your spouse, and pray for yourself. Pray for that God would soften your heart and help you forgive, and help you, like you said, like, not magnify the bad things, but magnify the good things. Help me to speak life and not death, and help me to put a zipper on my tongue and like, or my lips, and like not say these things that I keep saying and repeating. And sometimes when we're in these patterns, it's hard to get out of it. And it really takes like a supernatural intervention and our surrender, our willingness to change in order to like see things change, And so what would be like one last thing you would say to someone who maybe they're feeling it in their marriage and they're kind of in that rock hard place, and they're just like, I just want my wife to respect me, or I just want my husband to love me? What is one thing you would like inspire them and leave them with?
Yeah. So what I would say is, instead of saying to that person, here's what I need from you, asking them, what do you need from me? Right? The Bible says to think of each other bigger than ourselves, right? And so think about them first, and think what is it that you need from me? And allow them to speak that. And sometimes it won't be sometimes it's not as easy accepted when you come out and you say, this is what I need from you. Sometimes you just have to turn around and say, when you don't do these things, I feel this way, right? I feel unloved when, I've got the baby and I'm running all over the place and you're just sitting there watching TV. I feel unloved when, I've got dinner on the thing and the baby's crying, and you tell me, hey, the baby's crying, that makes me feel unloved. I feel unloved when, the house is a mess and, I come home and everything is everywhere and I can't find peace in my own environment, right? So it's also verbalizing what's draining the love out as much as what can bring that love in. And after you've verbalized it and after you've taken action, I feel like, you know, yes, God is everything, right? God is the most important thing. And prayer definitely changes everything. Prayer either changes you, changes the other person, or changes the situation, but something's gonna change, okay, when you pray. But the truth of the matter is that we can't just pray, right? If you just pray and you don't take action on the information that God has given to men to allow us to understand, it's almost like you get a car, it has a manual. The manual is telling you that if the car doesn't turn on, it's because this is happening, and you say, well, I'm gonna do that. I'm just not gonna do that. Well, then the car's not gonna turn on. You've got to listen to the wisdom that God has given men and has put it in books. You've got to put in the work, because me praying for my weight to come off ain't going to do nothing. I've tried. Trust me. The Lord will give you wisdom on what to do next through prayer, but you've got to make the decision to take action on the information and be able to hear the voice of the Holy Spirit when He tells you, hey, she's coming in that door and she's got a whole bunch of packages in her hand. Go help her. And you'd be like, whatever, I'm mad at her today. If you don't listen to the voice of the Holy Spirit telling you what to do, and you don't take action on the information that you've been given, you're not going to go anywhere. But then prayer is what seals it all, right? Because it's like exponential change, right? We can put in the work, but when we bring in the Holy Spirit and when we bring prayer into the situation, trust me, the word says that the battle is not against flesh and blood, right? It's against principalities of the heavenly realms, right? There is principalities that is trying to keep your marriage away, right? Continuously. And you have to be praying against that. And you got to be praying for your marriage. But that comes in conjunction too with you doing what you've got to do to ensure that we're three parts, right? Body, mind, and spirit. The spirit, yeah, prayer, absolutely. But you also have to deal with your spouse's brain and your spouse's body. If their love language is physical touch and you don't ever want to give them sex, there ain't no prayer that's going to fix that problem, right? You've then pray that the Holy Spirit gives you the desire, right? To come into that unity, in that sexual and bodily unity.
That's good. Yeah, one of the things that I was thinking about as you were speaking is, I think like when we get irritated, like some of the examples you shared, like, if I'm carrying bags and you don't help me, that really hurts my feelings. Or if I am cooking and you don't offer to help me, or you don't clean the kitchen after I cooked, those things hurt my feelings. And I think some of those things we're not as self-aware as all the time. We just like lash out and like, well, like, why aren't you helping me? Or like, whatever. Or we just let it simmer in ourselves and we don't say anything about it. And I think one good practice is like, if there's something that's irritating you, is just like writing it down and bringing it up at the right time. And a really great place to do that is if you do have a weekly date night, to bring those things up. And one of the things that Torrance and I do is we just ask each other, like, hey, how are we doing? How am I doing in our marriage? Like, what would you like to see better? What would you like to see improved? Or was there something that bothered you that I did this week? And bringing that up and allowing us to deal with it quickly, but also having a place where we can do that at. So I'm not just like lashing out at him in the middle of like whatever we're doing, but really having a space and a time for that. Maybe that's like every night before you guys go to bed, or maybe that's a weekly date night. But like really having those spaces where like that can be it's okay to happen. You don't want to definitely do that in the middle of when they're working on something or they're having a project or you're dealing with your kids. Like, that's not the time and place, and you will experience that if you do it in that time and place, it's going to hurt. It's going to come back at you. And so yeah, I think having a weekly date night and then bringing up those things in a good timing and writing them down if you really need to like process them or save them for later.
Yeah, that's good. You just got to be really wise about not being your date night where every time we go on a date, we're going to end up in an argument, right? Yeah. We've got to be really wise about that because otherwise the date nights are going to become dreaded, right? I made that mistake many times, particularly we would go on walks and it would be time to talk and we'd end up arguing about something. And now he doesn't want to go on a walk with me anymore. So, but yeah, you gotta like be careful not to, yes, it is important. And I remember our pastor Glenn would always say, like he would ask Natalie, like a question like that, like, how am I doing? And what is one thing I can do more of? And one thing I can do less of, right? And asking those questions but also being very mature that when this person tells you how they feel, don't get angry, don't get annoyed, don't make it a fight. Make it so it's introspection, right? And not be reactive and defensive about it either. Because if your spouse opens up about how he or she feels, and you react and you are defensive every time, they're not going to open up next time. So really being willing to ask that question, like, how are we doing? What can I do more of? What can I do less of? Will definitely make a difference. But don't do it every single date night.
No, not every single date night. That, yeah, we don't want to end up in fights every week. Right. That's true. But I think one thing, though, is good to, like, know is, like, some date nights do end up in fights. Yeah. And I think sometimes, like, newlyweds don't know that. Like, I wish someone would have told me that when I first got married. Like, yeah, because, like, when you're dating, your dates don't end up in fights. But after you're married, sometimes they end up in fights. And, like, that's okay. Like, it's okay. It's part of the deal. But I really enjoyed this conversation. It was so good. I hope that it was helpful to people who are listening. And thank you so much for listening to God, You, and Everyone Else. Our next episode, we're going to be talking about love and respect. So if you want your spouse to love you more or respect you more, or maybe you don't want to end up in that situation in the future, check out the next episode.